Have you ever bumped into a stranger and it changed your life? I'd like to begin today by telling you about one of my dearest friends. Her name's Levine. She lives in southeast London with a 10-year-old son. How we came to meet, Levine and I, is an interesting story. It was actually her dog, Misty, that I first met. I was walking in central London one evening years ago, and this little black and white fluffy dog came yapping at my feet. Thankfully, her bark was worse than her bite, as when she got to my ankles, she flipped over on her back so I could stroke her belly, before running over to her owner, who was sitting in a shop doorway nearby. It was obvious with one look that Levine was sleeping on the streets. She smiled when I greeted her, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. I asked if I could sit down, and Misty curled up in the blanket next to us, and Levine began sharing how she came to be homeless. I'll come back to her story in a minute. We judge people in this situation, or they can be completely overlooked. There can be stigmas surrounding this issue that create what feels like this massive gap between those facing this reality and those walking or driving by. Do you feel this is reflective of a much broader cultural pattern that we're experiencing in our world today? So often we fail to recognize one another as real and complex beings beneath whatever it is that confronts us from the outside. Some days when I was living in London, I would be stepping over people who were sleeping in the entrance of my nearest train station. And at the time, I had no idea how to help, beyond buying someone a cup of coffee or giving some spare change if I had it in my pocket. But none of these interactions made me feel any more connected to the people that I was seeing. But that would change for me one day. While working as a hairdresser in a salon in the UK 10 years ago, I'd finished work one day and I saw a gentleman who was sleeping on the street at the time with his belongings, his sleeping bag next to him. And I remembered I had my scissors in my bag and had a thought. I wonder if I'd like a haircut. So I went over to have a conversation. His name was Derek, and he was definitely surprised by my offer. But he said yes. So I set up my things right there on the street. And as I began combing Derek's hair and spraying it wet, I was struck by the level of intimacy that was being shared between two people who only moments before were complete strangers. I thought about the last time he would have been touched or cared for in this way. And actually the background noise of the city, with all this movement around us, it turned out to be the perfect environment for us to talk on a deep level. And there was the space to allow this moment to flow organically. I wasn't waiting for my next client to turn up. There was no money exchange between us, just our time. And as the haircut went on, it was as if this imaginary door was opened and he was now visible to the world. As people stopped to tell Derek how great he looked. And it was beautiful to hand him the mirror at the end, to see his face, his smile. Yeah, it was a really lovely moment. But you know what stayed with me more was how much his energy changed. It was fascinating. I was with somebody in that moment who was in their essence, with a completely different way about them to just moments or an hour before. And something shifted in me in this moment too, truly. Because although I was part of a culture that felt increasingly more disconnected, I found this really simple human way to push the needle in the other direction. So I began doing this whenever I could. And I started meeting people from all walks of life. And the haircut became this really amazing way to make somebody feel good, to make them feel more dignified. But with each encounter I had, it was more clear to me that simply being with the person was the most powerful aspect. And since those early days, when I started doing this, I've had hundreds of experiences like this in different cities around the world, with people like Joel from Cuba, I met Joel in San Francisco, California. He'd actually been working the morning before we met on a construction site, yet he was sleeping in a park nearby at the time. Or like Cedric, who found himself homeless in Paris. After losing his job and a separation from his partner in a short space of time, it was actually Cedric's cardboard sign that first caught my attention. He'd handwritten, "Vote for Cedric for the next president." A beautiful human being he was. Or like Rashid, who, as many thousands of other people, have to travel from rural villages in India to Mumbai, where we met, in the hopes to find better work opportunities, to send money home to their family, oftentimes whole families living on the street, whether they actually get a job or not. These stories, I wanted to start sharing them. After a few months, I began doing so. With permission, I started to share these stories on my Instagram, and I left the words, "Do something for nothing," as a call to action, in the hope that other people might join me. And before long, that's what started to happen. I began receiving messages from people doing similar things in their communities. There were high school students sharing lunch with senior citizens who don't even have any family to come and see them, or yoga teachers offering their time for free for people who couldn't afford it, and parents making care packages with their children to give out to people who were experiencing homelessness in their neighborhoods. I've realized all of us have the power to shape culture in this way, by just bringing a little bit more love and attention to our everyday actions. At one point, some news channels picked up the work that I was doing, and almost overnight, thousands of people were seeing this. It was really beautiful to see how this simple idea spread. But for me, it always comes back to people like Levine, who, from that chance encounter in London that we had, has really become one of my best friends. She told me that first evening that we met, the reason she became homeless was actually a choice to liberate herself from a completely unbearable situation. She was married for several years, many of those enduring domestic violence. She finally left her husband after the second time he hospitalized her. Upon hearing her story, what could I really do or say to truly honor the depth of what she'd been through? I want you to think about the last time someone sat and received you in your experience, perhaps when you needed it the most. What did it mean to you? When we slow down enough to acknowledge the existence of another person in this way, sometimes it's not about finding the right words. Instead, creating a space for us to feel seen in our experience. And that's what I could give Levine in that moment. And I'm really, really happy to share there's been huge changes in her life since that first day we met. From sleeping on the streets to having a home. Family. To helping other people in her community. And feeling the love and the self-worth that she does today. You know, every time we make a snap judgment about a person, it's a practice to remember that there's a human being in there who's probably carrying something. I bet there are some people in this audience that are going through something really challenging in their life right now. Can we be open to receive one another in this way? You know, in the eyes of the world, it's going to mean nothing, but it's going to mean everything to that person. I know we live busy lives, but ultimately all we have is here and now, who we are day to day, moment to moment. And in this way, we live in the little things. And when we acknowledge this fact, suddenly the meaning we can bring to each day becomes something really important in our daily interactions. So if you take anything from my talk today, it's that reclaiming our presence is a powerful choice in the times we're living in. It's a gift to ourselves and to the people around us. Thank you very much. Thanks.